If you stop to add it up, the amount of money you spend on food is likely one of your biggest weekly expenses. And now a new report out this hour warns that your food costs are going up next year. Now, the report says the average Canadian family can expect their grocery bill to go up $411 in 2019. And as Olivia Stefanovich tells us, the trend towards healthier eating is driving that cost increase.
Lettuce, strawberries, carrots, no matter what the food is, the price of produce and fruits is increasing next year by as much as 3 to 6%. That's according to Canada's food price report, and researchers say it's simply a matter of demand outweighing supply.
We still have a limited supply of product, particularly in Canada when we can't produce a lot of our vegetables and fruits all year round. Fruit and vegetables are a very perishable product. They have to get to market quickly, so small fluctuations in temperature, weather events can have a big impact on supply and a big impact on price.
The problem, researchers say, is mainly due to poor growing conditions, a surge in plant-based protein consumption, and the fact that more greenhouses are switching their crops from food to cannabis. Dietitians want to make sure everyone still has access to affordable, healthy diets.
Just looking for prices while you're there, just kind of doing a quick comparison. So in the fresh produce, look for kind of the cheapest, maybe like 2 or 3 cheapest fruits, 2 or 3 cheapest veggies. If that's still out of your budget, head over to the frozen section, get a few bags of frozen veggies and frozen fruit, and then also how you can incorporate your protein. So if you don't want to, animal protein like chicken, beef can be quite expensive. So going for that, those plant-based proteins, lentils, beans, chickpeas are a great way. So those are kind of like when you're at that store, you can still make like a more affordable choices to be eating healthy on a budget.
For the first time in a decade, the price of meat is going down, but food prices are expected to exceed the national average in British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario. And researchers say the costs won't go down anytime soon. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, we're going to stay on this story because there were a number of points that were raised that really caught our attention this morning. And with that, I want to invite and introduce Scott Peterson, of course, Megan Roberts, part of our team. They're here to talk about some of the issues raised in Stefanovich's report. And let's start, Megan, with this idea of an increased preference for plant-based proteins.
Yeah, there's been a big trend that we've been seeing over the past couple of years of Canadians reducing the amount of meat or cutting meat entirely from their diets. We've been seeing that for a number of groups that move away from traditional chicken, pork, and beef and towards lentils or chickpeas or quinoas and other plant-based protein sources. Let's take a look at what that means at some of the numbers. So 3 million Canadians, more than 3 million Canadians this year said that they are going to eliminate meat from their diets. That at a different Dalhousie study that was released earlier. Now, that same study says that over half, 63% of vegans and vegetarians are younger than 38 years old. So there's a trend in those younger generations towards moving away from meat. And you can see that number reflected in this study, in the foodscape, because that demand for meat is lower, those prices for meat lowering for the first time in the study's history. And that downward trend is expected to continue until 2020. And meanwhile, we're seeing more plant-based options on the market. A good example of that is this Beyond Meat, which is known for its meatless burger. Now it's at more than 25,000 restaurants across the world. And just as a personal example, some of us here in the studio have tried to go and get that burger because they serve it down the street, and many times it's been sold out. So even within our own kind of Toronto bubble, we can see some of those trends, Michael.
Yeah, and in fact, even local grocery stores, because it used to be that the vegetable section was as large as the meat section. Well, the meat section is now half the size, and the vegetable section has almost doubled. And another part that raises eyebrows with the study, Scott, is the transition, not only from meat to vegetables, but also changing the crops that farmers are growing away from traditional vegetables to marijuana now that it's legalized in this country. And that's an interesting part of this report. It doesn't say how much they're anticipating it being transitioned over from vegetables in these greenhouses over to pot production, for example, trying to itemize that. But they are saying that there's going to be more diversity in growing food in this country than ever before when you look at the greenhouse situation. Never mind climate change and maybe the necessity of having to grow stuff inside. But 2019, according to the study, is a year in transition. Right now, there's about 15 million square meters of greenhouse vegetation
population being grown. That works out to $1.3 billion. They call this farm gate value as far as the value of what is sold. But when you compare that to what they're anticipating, the same study here for marijuana consumption in the marijuana market is $5 billion. That's about 4 times larger than what they currently produce. So the question here that really the study is sort of hinting at is how much farmers might be inclined to switch over from growing vegetables over this new cash crop that people don't really know anything about. And when you look at, you've got companies like Coca-Cola, Heineken, Molson, Constellation Brands, all thinking about, getting into this as well. Big question marks about what this is going to mean about our supply.
Okay, well, that is the start of the conversation. We're going to speak about it throughout the morning. Scott, Megan, thank you for that.